listening to the GM Shuffle with Michael Lombardi, presented by DraftKings and VSiN. Here is Femi Abebefe.
Welcome to another edition of the GM Shuffle with Michael Lombardi, presented by DraftKings and VSiN. I'm your host, Femi Abebefe. As always, make sure to subscribe, rate, and review wherever you get your podcasts. Our producer, Elliot Bowman, with us on the ones and twos. Michael, happy NFL schedule release. The schedule came out late last night. I've been poring over it. I haven't gotten through all of the schedule. We've gone through, I believe, like half of it, at least in terms of what I think could happen in these games. So we have some of those takes with us. We got all the marquee stuff, the primetime games, the holiday games, the international games. How are we doing today? This is a fun day.
It is a good day. I mean, what did you go right to your Cowboys schedule and look at what you see for them? Did you do that, or did you just kind of bounce around a little bit looking at the team? You did do that, didn't you?
I had
and
to.
You went through it. I think we could. You went through it. I think we can win that one. I think we can win this one. I'm not so sure about that one. You know. Right?
Every fan does that for their team. Every fan, you go through the exercise, and it's a knee-jerk reaction. But the start is a little bit tricky. I must say, the start is a little tricky with the schedule that they gave them.
I think that's a great point. But I think what everybody does at first is they look through this thing because our wives have us scheduled to go to some wedding that we probably don't even know the bride and groom, but we're supposed to know them really good, right?
Yeah.
And the wedding naturally, that's why we have June brides, is because it should be in June. I think I got to go to a couple this next month. But, I mean, when somebody throws one on a Sunday in the fall or even a good Saturday in the fall, you're like, wait a minute, where's the bar? Can I watch the college game? Yes. So you're looking at that. That's the first thing. Do I have a conflict here? Do I have something that I don't want to see? I think that's kind of the first thing you look at, and then
that's why I got married in April.
And then you go from there.
It's why I got married in April. I'm like, hey, we're doing a spring wedding. We're not messing with the fall.
No, perfect. And so I think what you said earlier too, though, Femi, I think it's so damn important is the start, right? Mm-hmm. Like, and I wrote about this for VSiN Online. I mean, I went to the Raiders schedule, just going through it, and I'm like, whoa, that's not an easy start to their year. They go 2 road games in a row, right? They have the hardball travel. They go to Los Angeles to play one hardball. They fly all the way across the country to play another hardball. Okay, can they win one of those 2? I don't know. They come back, easy game, Carolina, you think. Then they got Cleveland, Denver, Pittsburgh, Los Angeles Rams, Chiefs, Bengals. They're bye. If you that's the thing. That's a tough 9 weeks, I think. What do you think?
I think it's very difficult. I mean, even coming out of the bye, look what they have. They have at the Dolphins, home Broncos, at the Chiefs, at the Bucks. So out of the bye, you have 3 of the 4 on the road after such a tough stretch there. And it's hard. I know a lot of the discussion people will make about, hey, look how this team finishes. We probably shouldn't put as much weight into the back end of the season because we all know as football fans, we don't wish injuries upon anybody, but it's the reality of the game. Injuries do happen. So you don't know what the back half is going to look like as we sit here on May 16th. But that start is a very, very difficult start. And if sometimes when you don't get off to a good start, things can kind of snowball downhill.
Yeah.
And you might suffer injuries your own self, and now you're playing with one hand behind your back.
Right, and then if you don't have it's one thing if the Patriots get off to a bad start. Their option is, okay, we're going to go to Drake May, right? Or if Minnesota doesn't get off to a good start, we're going to go to J.J. McCarthy, right? The world champion Falcons, I don't know what their pivot is if they don't get off to a great start, but I'm sure Super Bowl winning GM Fontenot has all those answers written down in his notepad, with details. But I think that's the concern, right? I mean, if you're the Giants and you don't get off to a great start, right? And there's pressure. There's pressure for you. It's the 100th season. There's a lot going for you. Like, what do you do? Like, where's your alternative? You going to Drew Lock? That's why I think I asked you the question last week on the pod. Like, who's going to get the first pick in the draft next year? And, of course, everybody in May thinks they're going to win 1,000. Everybody's going to win. Mm-hmm. But who could be in play for that? I asked you. I've asked Stormy. I've asked everybody I've done. I was on Bill Simmons' pod this week. I asked him, who is? And, the 4 candidates in that category were clearly Carolina, the Raiders, the Giants, and nobody mentioned Arizona, which I thought was kind of strange, right? Nobody mentioned Arizona.
The mayor's back.
Because the mayor's back, right? Exactly. So I think those were the Giants. The Giants were in there. The Raiders were in there. Carolina definitely was in there. You know,
I threw New England in there when you asked me.
New England was the other one.
Yeah, when you asked me, I said New England. New England with Carolina, the two teams that will be underdogs in all 17 games, at least as we sit here right now. On the DraftKings, shout out to our show sponsor, DraftKings. They've put up lines, sides, and totals for all 272 of these games. Patriots, Panthers, underdogs in all 17 of the games. That can obviously change once we get into the season. Things change. Injuries happen. Maybe teams outperform, they underperform. But Patriots and Panthers right now, the two worst teams according to the DraftKings projections.
Yeah, I mean, but they, the Patriots have an alternative. I mean, Brissett's a good player. Can they get everything going? What are they doing defensively? I don't say Brissett's an elite player. I just think he can manage the game, right? And that could certainly help them. And and when will they go to Drake May if they go to him at all? See, I think that's the question, right? Let's go back. Let's look at Dallas for a second. I know you went over that, right?
Yep.
Everybody knows there's pressure on Dallas, right?
Oh, yeah.
Everybody knows the first time they lose a game, people are going to ask Jerry about Mike's status and all that crap, right? So they open the season up. They open the season up in Cleveland. Tough game. Come back, play New Orleans at home. That won't be easy, right? Then they play Baltimore at home. That's not going to be easy. They go to the Giants on a short week to play on Thursday night. I thought the Thursday night schedule, not to jump around, I thought the prime bid, I thought that was great.
Yeah. They hooked up Al. Al got hooked up, man.
It did. I mean, at Pittsburgh, they got to go to Pittsburgh, Detroit at home, and then they have their bye. So their bye's in week 7. At that point, what do you think their record's going to be after 6 games?
I think 3-3 is what I thought last night. When I was kind of going through it, I was like,
is that what you thought?
That's what I thought. Like, the Cleveland game on the road, Tyler Guyton's first game, if you can put him at left tackle, well, introduce you to Myles Garrett, the defensive player of the year. That might not go very well for him. I think that Cleveland game is going to be difficult. I see them starting the year 1-1 after those first 2 weeks. The Baltimore game, I mean, you got the MVP coming to town. I think that's a game that they could win it, but I think it's a 50-50 coin flip game. At New York, they should be able to take care of that one. At Pittsburgh, while they're the better team, that is a tough place to play at night in primetime. That that crowd is going to be fired up. Obviously, there's the historic rivalry with the Cowboys and the Steelers. And then you come home to face the Detroit Lions, who are coming off the bye. So you're coming back home to play this Lions team that wants revenge after the Brad Allen ineligible receiver nonsense that we saw last year. I think 3-3. If it's better than 3-3, I consider that a big time win for this team.
Yeah, I would say that would be unbelievable, right? I would think that would be great. I think that would be a tremendous, 3-3, but with a positive upswing. I think there's 3-3 where you don't have those disappointing losses, right? Where you blow a game. Because look, let's face it, if you don't do that, and you lose these games on the road like you've wanted to, I think it becomes a real issue.
Yeah, I mean, if they're 2-4 going into the bye, what do you think everyone's going to be talking about in the Metroplex? And all across
that's all
the
they're going to talk about. That whole week's, that whole documentary that Jerry just got done on them is all going to be talked about that, right?
10-part documentary on how they're going to fire Mike McCarthy. I mean, but yeah, I think that there's going to be a lot of pressure for this Cowboys team to get off to a good start, just given the fact that, this schedule is not very easy. But some other teams, look, we have some of these marquee games we have a Super Bowl rematch, Chiefs at the Niners. Which game are you most looking forward to seeing out of the 272? Obviously, we haven't been able to rank them all 1 through 272, but there are some awesome games here. You get the Harbaugh Bowl on Monday Night Football, November 25th. Chiefs-Niners, of course, is an amazing game, the rematch of the Super Bowl. Jets-Niners to start off the Monday Night Football season. And all the Chiefs are playing in a lot of these marquee games, but there's some fun contests that we have on deck this fall.
I think I'm really anxious to watch the Jets in the opener because the Jets, we're going to be subjected to them 4 more times. And if they're not any good, that's a problem, right? Yeah, they don't have 6; they have 5, right?
No, they have 6 primetime games.
So I'm going to watch them on the.
Yeah, they have 6.
They have 6 primetime. Oh my Lord, they got 6. So I'm actually, to me, it's never about who they're playing; it's about evaluating their team. Like I really am anxious to see what they look like. I'm anxious to see. I thought the schedule did a great job. Bringing Arthur Smith into Atlanta to open up the season, since it was all his fault why they only won 21 games over the last 3 years, and it wasn't anybody else's. So I thought that was kind of interesting. I was shocked that Atlanta's just a 1.5 favorite. I mean, Pittsburgh on the road in that game, how enticing is that?
Tomlin as a dog is always going to be enticing. If you ask me, one of the great underdog coaches in modern NFL history. DraftKings has that at 2.5. It's 3 in other places, so obviously shop around as well, like we like to say in the betting community. But I think that's a really fun game. There are 2 new quarterbacks, Wilson of the Steelers, Cousins with the Falcons. How is that going to kind of come to fruition in the opening week of this NFL regular season? I think that's a really fun game. I mean, how about the game? I mean, we got some other ones. The Cardinals going to Buffalo. People are bullish on this Arizona team. I'm not quite there, but what's Buffalo going to look like post Diggs and a restructured wide receiver room? I'm excited about that game. Of course, the Raiders-Chargers is really exciting with all those Raider fans in Southern California. Denver at Seattle, Bo Nix in that environment against the Seattle, the 12th man, Sean Payton. I think that's a really fascinating game.
What was I was reading Matt Human's column this morning, and he had that at 4.5. Now, what did DraftKings? Maybe he wasn't using the DraftKings numbers.
He was.
I don't know.
Yeah, he was using DraftKings numbers 4.5. Okay. There's a 6 out there in the market.
The 6?
There's a 6.
Wow.
Yeah. You can bet it now.
I thought the 4.5 was way too. I thought the 4.5 was too heavy. I really did. I mean, one thing about opening games is you really have to study the team in the preseason. You got to see if they're really getting the team ready. They're going to have a lot of question marks. It's early. I think there's a lot of bad teams that can beat good teams on opening day. I really do. That's why, what was the line in the Arizona going to Buffalo? I think I saw Matty Humans had it at 7.
Yep, 7.
Yeah, okay. And I wasn't sure that's the right line. I wasn't sure that's the right one. But I think I would take the points there, not because I think Arizona's going to be better. I just think, to me, I don't know enough about Buffalo. How good are they?
Yeah, and I think that's really good advice. And we'll get into the week 1 lines more in depth. We'll get into the Thanksgiving, the Christmas. Christmas is on a Wednesday, but the NFL's still going to give us 2 games this Christmas. Merry Christmas to everybody out there. The international schedule, we're going to go through all of it on the other side. NFL schedule release special edition. Obviously, there's other news. Goff signing the big contract. We'll get to all of that stuff. The Giants have new jerseys. They're also going to be on the off-season Hard Knocks. HBO is welcoming us to Big Blue and what they got going on there in New Jersey. So we'll break it all down. Coming up next year, this is the GM Shuffle on the DraftKings Network.
You're listening to the GM Shuffle with Michael Lombardi, presented by DraftKings and VSiN. Here is Femi Abebefe.
All right, we're rolling along, pouring through this schedule, and during the break, we were discussing this Ravens schedule coming up. They play a record high, not record high, but at least a league high, 10 playoff teams from the previous season. Now, of course, things flip. There's parity. Playoff teams from last year aren't going to be playoff teams this year, but on the surface, that at least looks like a pretty difficult schedule. 10 playoff teams from a year ago on the Ravens schedule, more than any other team.
Well, I think, too, plus the North is good, right? Mm-hmm. I think the North is good. And so not only do they play these playoff teams, obviously Cleveland was a playoff team last year in the division.
Pittsburgh as well.
Pittsburgh was as well, but now Cincy's going to be better. There's no relief here for them, right? I don't see them having any relief. So that's going to be a challenge. I mean, they're going to have. I mean, it's and I think the one thing about when you look at this, I think when you look at Baltimore, they're going to take a little bit of time. They've got a lot of moving pieces here. They're going to take a little bit of time to get everything kind of aligned and feel like they know their team and what are they doing, yada yada yada, all that stuff. So I just kind of get the sense that it may take a little bit more than, just week 1, they're not going to be in their prime. Now, I know John Harbaugh is good at training camp. I know there'll be a physical camp. I know they'll coach their asses off. All that, they'll be ready to go, unlike a lot of teams, but I still think that's going to be a challenge.
Yeah, the Ravens have a challenging schedule. The 49ers, some say, might have a challenging schedule in terms of situational spots. They're at a rest disadvantage. I believe they play 4 teams who are coming off the bye this season, which that's a disadvantage right there. Those teams getting a little bit of extra prep time and a little bit of extra rest time to get healthier. But with that said, the 49ers are the only team that will be favored in every single game over at DraftKings, at least as it stands right now. Every other team is an underdog in at least 2 games. So the Niners, the highest power-rated team last year, they carry that power rating into this year. Is that justified based on what we've seen so far through this offseason?
Well, I think there's question. Every team has questions, right? So, I mean, how are they go? What's Nick Sorensen going to do? I think you have to go through it, right? I think one of the things you have to, and I've been keeping track of this all through the year, is you got to go through the coaches, the changes in coaches. What does that mean? What players are they counting on? How's this all going to come together? Like when you look at like Jacksonville, for example, there's a lot of moving pieces in Jacksonville, right? There's a lot of players. They have a completely new defensive coaching staff, right? So they got that going. You got to see how are they going to improve on offense? What are they going to be like on offense? I mean, there's a lot of things that have to get done for them to start the year off, really good. I was yesterday when we were doing the Lombardi line, I was surprised that, Chicago, where is it? I have it here on my list here, but in the international games, right? We had the Bears were a 0.5-point favorite against the Jags over in London. And the next week, the Jags are a 6-point favorite against the Patriots. So either the Bears number's inflated or the Jags number's wrong. I don't know. It's a neutral field, right?
Yep.
So would you make the Bears with a rookie quarterback favorite against Jacksonville?
Nope, I would not. That's one that really stood out to me when I was looking at the international games, because those came out before the rest of the regular season games. I mean, I get that there's a lot of Chicago Bears love, and maybe people are down on Jacksonville based on how they finished last year, but I still think Jacksonville's the better team. And there's a lot – people are expecting a lot from Caleb Williams, and I think he's going to be a good quarterback as well. But, man – he's still we've seen better quarterbacks struggle as rookies before. I don't understand why there's this expectation of him to be, hey, this is a playoff team in year one, and this guy's never stepped foot on an NFL field. I think that's a lot of expectations on them.
I do too, but look, Chicago tends to, they're inflated. People talk about the Cowboys number being inflated. I think the Bears numbers are. I mean, the Chicago fans are real. And they put their money where their mouth is. They don't mess around now. But I was taken back by that, right? I thought that was somewhat strange to see, especially, when you look at there'll be a lot of moving pieces in Chicago. How many are they going to be an 11 team? All that. Jacksonville's familiar with playing over there. I kind of was surprised by that.
The defending Super Bowl champions, Kansas City Chiefs, who, by the way, shout out to them. They used a clip from Monday's GM Shuffle in their little hype video for the opener. So we appreciate them listening to the GM Shuffle and plugging us there. But the Kansas City Chiefs, to go ahead and make history and be the first team to ever three-peat, it's going to be a tough hill. Because the Chiefs, Michael, they play on every single day of the week except Tuesday this year. They have the Wednesday Christmas. They have some Thursday night games going on. Black Friday game, they're playing on that one against the Las Vegas Raiders. And, of course, Saturday they'll be playing a game before the Christmas Wednesday game. I mean, it's going to be a hell of a ride for the Kansas City Chiefs here to go ahead and try to three-peat, something that no team has done in the Super Bowl era.
Well, I mean, look, everybody wants to see, Patrick Mahomes, but I think, to me, they start with the North, right? They start bang, bang at home, with the AFC North, Baltimore, Cincinnati. That's the Super Bowl. Cincinnati opens up with New England. Baltimore opens up with KC. So, I mean, those are tough games. You play, the Kansas City, has got two, I know they're home, but those are two hard physical games that you got to play. Then they come back and they got to travel, go to Atlanta, come back and play and go to the Chargers. Yeah, you're right. I mean, and then they have the Saints and they got an early bye at week 6. Do you want that early bye? See, I don't know. Sometimes I think the later the bye, the better. You get your team rested. You don't really know enough about your team after 5 weeks to be able to then go in and then make the changes you need to make. One of the things when you're on long weeks, like when they were on the long week with Christmas Day when they played there, they came back and they changed what they were going to do the next week. The other thing, they got a great break. Look, they play at San Francisco, but we know Andy Reid coming off a bye is always so good. Yep. So he gets more time to kind of go over San Francisco and get himself prepared, and then they play the Raiders. So one thing about Kansas City, you're right in the middle of the country, so you don't have to worry. The travel to either coast isn't that bad. It's 2.5 hours everywhere.
And they've made Allegiant Stadium their home away from home over the last 4 or 5 years as well, winning a Super Bowl and then beating the Raiders.
A lot of stadiums are home away from home.
They really have. It's Mahomes' league. We're all just living in it. But let's get to, though, the holiday game before we get to week 1 here. What did you make of the Thanksgiving Day slate? That's the one that always jumps to my attention. Of course, the Cowboys playing on Thanksgiving every year. We get Bears at the Lions, Giants at the Cowboys, and then Dolphins, our guy Tua, go into Lambeau Field Thanksgiving night to face the Green Bay Packers.
I didn't think Miami got breaks on the weather, right? I mean, they actually have to go to New England in November too.
Yeah.
So, usually Miami gets that break at late in the year. I think that'll be a great one. I can already see Big Daddy after eating turkey sitting on the couch just complaining about the Packers. I could just see it right now. I mean, I can visualize that. Look, how many Bears-Lions games have we had to watch
on Thanksgiving
when the Bears suck and the Lions sucked? I mean, we deserve to have a good one, right? This should be a good one.
Let's hope so.
Right? This should be a good one. I mean,
it's at least every other year.
I think Thanksgiving. I don't care who they put on Thanksgiving, right? I think it's just the day is the greatest day ever. And then we get the Black Friday game, which has really been highlighting. I mean, you can't go wrong. Even Will Hill can't complain about what's on Thanksgiving.
Well, wait until they see the point spreads for those games if we get there. And if Detroit's a big favorite or if Dallas, why they give us these games with more than touchdown favorites? But like you said, we're all going to watch on Thanksgiving, which is why they give us Bears, Lions, and Giants, Cowboys.
It's like the Amazon schedule. I mean, I think what Amazon did was, and a thing I noticed, and I haven't documented this, but I mean, what I've noticed is they've gotten away from playing your division at the end of the year.
Well, so you still have it at the last week, but I think week 17 you can play some other teams though. Yeah, right, exactly. So but I thought Amazon got a really good schedule. I really did. Yeah. Didn't you? I mean, they got a lot of good games. They got Buffalo, Miami, divisional game. Mm-hmm. All right, so the New England Jet game's not going to be great. Al's not going to be happy, but perhaps he can go to, a great restaurant in New York, whatever. Cowboy Giants, Al should just stay in New York. Why go? Exactly. Why travel back and forth? It's not so special.
There. Bucks Atlanta, we get to watch the winning Super Bowl team. We get to see everybody in the booth sit next to Arthur Blank. I mean, who wouldn't want that on Thursday night, right? San Francisco, Seattle, another great game. Denver, New Orleans, the return of Sean Payton to New Orleans. I mean, you got to love that. Minnesota Rams, Kevin O'Connell knows his coach. Houston Jets. Okay, Houston against there we have to take the Jets. Cincy, Baltimore, that's a great one. Washington, Philly, another good one. Pittsburgh, Cleveland. I mean, I don't see how you got. There's no bad ones. Really, there's none. I'm going through it. Even the last ones, Chicago, Seattle goes to Chicago.
Yeah, I mean, even Green Bay, Detroit, week 14 is an amazing
should be happy.
Game. Yeah, Al should be very happy.
But I think this plays along this plays along what I wrote about today, Femi, which is how hard it is for Survivor. It's going to be really hard in Survivor. Now, I know everybody will take Cincy versus the Patriots. They'll take Cincy to win that one if you want to use Cincy here, right? Or they'll take, which other one will they take, right? When you look at the opening day.
You'll get some Buffaloes in there since they're a touchdown favorite. I think you'll get some people that play.
Buffalo, right? You'll get Buffalo.
I think people will play Seattle playing against the rookie quarterback on the road. And I think also, too, when you think about it, they're not going to want to save – they might not want to save Seattle for later down the line. It could be similar to Washington last year when they played Arizona and everybody was on the Commanders because, hey, I don't want to save this team, so let me just use them now in week 1 to try to do that. Maybe that's an angle that you see. There's no team you go to. I mean, Carolina plays New Orleans in New Orleans week 1, right? So somebody may take New Orleans there. Oh, God bless.
But you might, right? When are you going to use New Orleans again? Okay. So, but there's no, we got to bet this is an easy one. Well, of course, all the easy ones end up biting you in the ass. How many people lost out when Indy got beat by Jacksonville?
Yeah. Or how many people lost out with Minnesota last year hosting Tampa Bay whenever it said, the Bucs are bad, Baker's bad, and the Vikings just made the playoffs last year. Then here's the Bucs going into Minneapolis and winning week 1 and knocking people out of Survivor. Like you just never know with these things. And Cincinnati, I get it. They're a 9-point favorite, but we've already said about Cincinnati, they're slow starters under Zach Taylor. I got burned by the Bengals last year in week 2. I'm not putting the Bengals. If I make it to Survivor past Halloween, that's when I'll consider Cincinnati. But before then, I ain't doing it. I'm not doing it with this team that starts slow.
You learned. You learned from your mistake. I appreciate it. I do. Yeah. I get it.
Which in hindsight, it's like I was going against the Baltimore Ravens in week 2. They just ended up having like the best record in the league that year and the fucking MVP. It's obviously hindsight's always 20/20, but it's funny to look back on it.
It all came against you.
It really did. And Joe Burrow had a messed up calf. and I was backing him with the Survivor on the line. All right, let's do week one when we get back to this. We discussed a little bit of Survivor, but I want to go more into these week one games. Also, the Christmas Day slate, doubleheader on a Wednesday, the international slate. We'll continue on the podcast, but for DKN, we'll see you guys on Monday.
You're listening to the GM Shuffle with Michael Lombardi, presented by DraftKings and VSiN. Here is Femi Abebefe.
All right, we were talking about Survivor in the last segment. For those who don't know or are uninitiated, Survivor's a fun game. They do it here at Circa, which is the one that I play and the one that gets a lot of publicity, but it's Survivor's everywhere, and it's essentially you pick a team each week just to win. It doesn't have to do with any of the point spread, just to win the game straight up, but the caveat is that you can't use that team later on in the season. So you kind of have to be strategic about having to save some teams, and some of the other ones are a little bit more straightforward versus the Circa one's a little trickier since it has the holidays. Thanksgiving counts as a week. Christmas counts as a week to get a total of 20 weeks versus the 18-week schedule. So for those who don't know what Survivor is, just thought I'd explain that right there as we're discussing it in the last segment. Yeah. But Survivor aside, when you look at week one, what makes week one so tricky to handicap? And when you're in the league, how do teams kind of get prepared for week one starting now in May?
Well, they don't, the problem is a lot of teams kind of gradually get into it. Well, you mentioned Cincinnati, right? Mm-hmm. They don't want to overwork their players. They kind of want to build up to the ending of the year, which 2 years ago was great. They got to the Super Bowl, or 3 years ago was great. 2 years they got to the conference championship game. So I think a lot of it, and I've been pretty good on week one numbers and handling it. I've been able to get off to a good start against Russo because I kind of focus on teams that I know have tough training camps, that are preparing for the camp, right? And the coach that's going to put a lot of emphasis on fundamentals, techniques, and pad level, and have their team conditioned. Because as we all know, we haven't gotten it yet. The weather's been the shits on the East Coast, but heat and humidity is all over the country in the first week of September. And so that does affect teams. If you go into Tennessee, which they don't have a home opener, but, you go into some places where the heat and humidity you could cut with a stick, it's tough. So I think you got to really look at the team, and then you got to be able to really evaluate the coaching staff and how is this all coming together. Because, the first preseason game, Houston didn't look very good offensively. They had moments in the first game. They moved the ball. They couldn't get it in the red zone. They moved it. The game was closer than the score against Baltimore. Yeah. But you could see that, they were moving the football, and then eventually when they went to Jacksonville, they were able to find a way to win games, and they got their thing going. So I think a lot of it is how you look. It's not this preseason games. It's the preseason attention that focuses. And then, as you mentioned earlier, too, right? Like Tennessee rarely plays Chicago. But Chicago doesn't know really what is Tennessee going to do defensively with Denard Walker as the defense coordinator, with Brian Callahan calling the plays. They're going to look at Cincinnati tape. There's a lot of uncertainty when you're looking at new staffs and new coordinators, right? Mm-hmm. Cleveland, Brady's going to do the Cleveland-Dallas game. So you got Mike Zimmer, new defense coordinator. So Cleveland's going to have to spend a lot of time studying old Minnesota tape to get used to what Zimmer's going to run and how he's going to call the game. And then it becomes a player evaluation. So who does all that is really important.
It almost feels like to me that week one feels like a season in itself, and then weeks 2 through 18 are different seasons. Yeah. Like you almost have to, because everyone will have their kind of their season-long takes of, I think this team's going to be good. I think this team might win the division. They might win the conference or whatever. But you almost have to put that off to the side for week one, just because, hey, some teams like a Cincinnati, not to pick on the Bengals this whole time, but if it's a little bit easier of a training camp, if they're more of, hey, let's focus on ascending in November or December, it might not look like what it's supposed to look like in September in week one, where we've seen them lose at home as a touchdown favorite to the Pittsburgh Steelers. We've seen them lose other games and kind of get behind the eight ball a little bit, just because they don't really, they're not hyper-focused on September. They're hyper-focused on getting better into November, December, and hopefully January.
Yeah, and then you got to take the team, right? All right, so Washington opens up at Tampa, heat, humidity problem. Okay, yeah. Now they're going against Todd Bowles. So Jaden Daniels is going to see pressure from that he's never seen before in his entire life.
Welcome to the NFL.
Okay, and Kingsbury's going to try to do a good job to protect him and handle that, but the game's going to move so fast it's going to be hard for him to really hone it down. and so that's going to be an issue. So Jacksonville goes to Miami. Well, we don't really know what Miami's going to be on defense with Anthony Weaver and Joe Barry. So, what is Jacksonville going to be like on offense, right? Are they going to be better in the offensive line? Do they have another running back? Or are they going to change? I mean, Etienne's a good player. Is Bigsby a good player? Is Trevor Lawrence going to be able to do some things, throwing the ball down the field with all these receivers they draft? So there's so many of those inside question marks that you have to answer, right? Raiders with new offensive coaches. The Chargers are completely new staff. What's that going to look like? How's that match up? And so that's really going to be a challenge. And I think if you got to spend a lot of time, I know we used to in Cleveland and New England, a lot of time on studying the coaches, where they came from, what's their tree, how they call the game, what they want to do. I think that's really important. But when you have a young quarterback like Daniels, that line's only 3.5. I would assume that gets to 4 pretty quickly.
Yeah, we're already seeing some 4s in other places. DraftKings is 3.5, but 4s pretty much across the board elsewhere. Is rookie quarterback on the road in that humidity, that could be troublesome for Jaden Daniels and the Washington Commanders. Yep. How do you factor in new head coaches, like first-time head, so like a Mike McDonald, a Gerard Mayo, these guys for week 1? Like, is it the surprise element that can maybe get them off to better starts than the market expects? Or is it they're still trying to play catch-up because they're getting used to this whole thing? I know they've been on NFL staffs before. They know what it's supposed to look like. But it's different when you're in the head coach seat, isn't it?
It is, but like if you're Dan Quinn's been a head coach before, so he kind of has an idea on how he wants to get his team ready. He's going to focus on the defense. Cliff Kingsbury's been a head coach before, so he's got to get the offense. So I think that when you're just a new head coach and you're trying to install a new system, install a new program, install a new culture, you could get caught from behind a little bit. There's no question. There's no question you can get caught. But I think when you have continuity, Houston's going to go open up at Indianapolis. Right? I mean, the last time they played, Gardner Minshew misses the ball over in the flat, right?
Yeah.
I mean, that shouldn't be a hard game to get ready for. Both teams know each other. They know personnel. It's going to come down to execution and how you handle training camp. What's your training camp like? Are you ready to play on that day? I think those are the fundamental questions you got to answer. You can steal. Bad teams can win in week 1 and week 2 of the NFL regular season. They can win. You can be 2-0 and be a shitty team. But eventually your tape declares who you are. And once people watch enough of your tape, you're in trouble.
Yeah, I think that's every single season. You can go back to a week 1, and there's a what the hell result in every single week 1. It's just like, how did that happen? Like Chicago beating the San Francisco 49ers a couple years ago. That comes to mind. Like, there's like always these crazy results that just don't make any sense when you look at the end of the season and one team is really good and the other team is really bad. We haven't mentioned this game, but this is a banger for Sunday Night Football. Rams at the Lions, rematch of last year's wild card game. Stafford going back to Detroit. We saw him go back in the playoffs last year. Lions being victorious in that matchup. Well, this one, Sunday Night Football to open the season, new defensive coordinator for the Los Angeles Rams. It will not Raheem Morris, obviously now with the Super Bowl winning Atlanta Falcons, as you like to call them. But Detroit, 3.5 points in the betting market right now. Lions have been in the news for doling out a lot of cash so far this offseason. Hopefully they're still hungry after all the rigatoni for the course of the offseason.
I got the sense they are. They paid their stars. I think they have a good plan. Look, they paid Goff. Goff's got a lot of money. They protect Goff, right? The difference between Goff and, say, Trevor Lawrence is Detroit's done a better job of protecting him. And now he's been in the same system for 3 years where Trevor Lawrence, who's coaching him, who's doing what, are they protecting him? A lot of that goes into that, right? So, and then I think what the Lions do know is they know what their cap costs are going to be for the next 3 years. The only contract they've got to handle is Hutchinson coming down the road. We'll see how that goes, right? They're going to pay him, but everything else becomes a replaceable part. Yeah, we like Jonah Jackson, great guard. We drafted him, we liked him. Can't afford to sign him. We'll bring Kevin Zeitler in, pay him a third of the money, okay? And we got a good player. We didn't get the same player, but we got a replaceable player for him. That's the system that we're operating in. And that's how you have to behave, and you have to draft good, right? You got to draft really well. You got to get those guys that you drafted and the free agents that you signed to play. And you can't do like Jacksonville does, which is every 3 years, cut the guys you signed 3 years ago to huge contracts. So I think that's, I don't think there'll be a letdown in Detroit. The head coach is too hyper, too active, too demanding, and too holding the players accountable.
Yeah. Yeah, that's why they built a really good program out there for the Detroit Lions. Goff, the deal that he signed, 4 years, $212 million, $170 million guaranteed is a contract. He's not, I believe, the second highest paid quarterback in the NFL, highest paid Detroit Lion in franchise history. Congratulations to Goff, who, I mean,
if you liked Hayden Hooker coming out in the draft, right? He's going to be an interesting guy to watch in the preseason because they're not going to move off. I mean, Hooker's going to sign a 4-year deal. He's going to be a free agent because this contract for Goff goes longer than the deal.
Yep.
So he's somebody that if you're a team like the Raiders or you're a team like the Giants, I mean, you got to spend a lot of time looking at him. Is he good enough? What do we think of him in college? You know, how's he running this system? Because he's going to be an experienced, available guy. Would they trade him now? I doubt it. They redshirted him all last year. But I think there's some of that. You know, when a contract gets signed, you know, that levels off to the next guy.
Yeah, it's like everything has a reaction to it in the NFL. It's all intertwined, and now that Goff is locked into 2028, I believe it is. Hendon Hooker now, it's an interesting guy that they could go ahead and he redshirted last year, obviously recovering from the ACL injury that he suffered in college football his final year there at Tennessee. So week one, do you have a favorite week one game that you would it's a lot of time between now and week one. It's September 8th for week one. So you'd be tying up the money for quite a bit of time, but is there a betting market that you see that you just you gravitate towards that when you looked at these week one spreads?
Well, I think, again, it goes back to what I've been writing about. I really think that Pittsburgh's going to be better. I don't know how good Atlanta is. I think Arthur Smith coming back into Atlanta knows everything about Atlanta's players. He knows what they're good at doing, what they're not good at. That's a great advantage for Pittsburgh. You're getting points on the road. I think there'll be more Steeler fans in Pittsburgh than they will be Atlanta fans, frankly. I think that's a pretty good play. You know, I think to me, anytime you get, you know, a game where you have a team that'll be well coached coming out that will have a tough training camp, I think you go with that. I really like that one. I don't know what to make of the Houston-Indy game because I think that's going to be one of those. That's a coin flip game. I wouldn't probably touch that because both teams will be ready to play. How good is Richardson going to be? Can I just wait and watch a little bit more before I make that decision? You know, I think the Cleveland one's the interesting one against your Cowboys because how good are the Cowboys and can they block this front of Cleveland on the road? We know Dallas isn't good on the road. You only have to give up a point.
Yeah, two new starters on that offensive line, at least for the Dallas Cowboys, against one of the most ferocious pass rushes, especially in Cleveland. We know they had their road struggles last year, but in Cleveland, that was the top defense in the league by margin. And good luck, Dak Prescott, in that game. Jim Schwartz is not going to be letting up anything in that week one game. It's pretty much a coin flip contest right now. They have it as Dallas a 1-point favorite. I'm sure that it's probably going to close pick 'em around that range with the Dallas Cowboys and the Cleveland Browns. Week one is always fascinating. Christmas, the NFL said they were going to give us Wednesday games, but then they retracted after they saw how big the damn rating was on the Christmas games last year. Now we have two of them on a Wednesday. Chiefs at the Steelers, Ravens at the Texans, and how they did it was they had all four of those teams play on the previous Saturday, so it could be the same sort of rest time as you usually get from a Sunday to a Thursday. So it's a little bit of a wrinkle late in the year for these teams playing on a Wednesday. They get an extended rest heading into Week 18, but what did you make of this Christmas Day slate that's going to highlight the AFC?
Well, I mean, look, again, like Thanksgiving, I'm not complaining about it, but I think we got two really good games. I mean, Pittsburgh at Christmas time is great. You know, Houston, it'll be closed. You know, those are two. It was a great playoff game last year, back and forth. I know Houston didn't play well in the second game, but I think both these teams, I think all four teams, what the league is telling us is this could be a playoff match that we're going to see. Does that usually hold true? No. But I think this could be but right now on paper, this is four playoff teams from last year going at it on Christmas Day. That's a pretty good deal.
Yeah, I think the Texans, shout out to the league for highlighting the Texans and showcasing them after what we saw last year. They want to put Stroud in primetime. We got Texans at Cowboys is a Monday night game. Texans hosting Chicago is the second week for Sunday Night Football. Caleb Williams at the Houston Texans. So they're putting the Texans in primetime because Stroud was obviously amazing last season, winning Offensive Rookie of the Year. You know, I looked at the international slate, and my big takeaway was, why do we have so much beef with Germany? We're sending them Giants, Panthers. I mean, the last couple of years.
Well, because they're going to watch it. They're going to love it. Are you kidding me? They're going to love it.
But 2 years ago, Michael,
2
years ago, we sent them Tom Brady. Last year, we sent them Mahomes against the Dolphins. And now it's Now it's Giants-Panthers.
I mean, they're going to love it. I mean, they love all those games. I mean, look, they just love football. I don't think they care as much about the uniforms as they care about the game, which is great. So why not give them that? Look, I mean, why not? How about the Giants being a 0.5 point favorite? That's all they are. Think about that. Think about that for just a moment. They're a 0.5 point favorite.
That's all they should be, as far as I'm concerned. I
don't agree.
I don't think they're what are you going to make them 3? I'd take the Panthers if that's the case. Whichever team was 3, I'd just take the other one. So it should probably be.
My only point with this is we talk about how bad the Panthers are, but nobody says how bad the Giants are.
Yeah.
And here we are on a neutral field, and they're basically it's a pick 'em.
Yeah, it's not looking good for old Big Blue in this spot here. Interesting note, though, our producer Elliot put this in the rundown, to watch every single NFL game this season because they're going to be streaming across Peacock, YouTube TV with the Sunday Ticket, ESPN+. The Christmas games are on Netflix. Shout out to Netflix getting into the NFL game. Amazon Prime, of course, has the Thursday night package. It's going to be around almost $800, about $850 for the entire NFL season, which it's obviously it's a lot of money. It's significant, but if you break it down into over the course of 18 weeks, it's not that much money.
Right, but we all have ESPN Plus. We all do have Netflix, whether they have football or not. We all have Amazon Prime, whether they have football or not. I mean, really, the only cost is Sunday Ticket at $350. I mean, I'm doing that. I thought Sunday Ticket this year was great.
It's phenomenal.
I didn't have to watch the red zone. I could put 4 games on one TV, do 4-game Femi, and then watch another game. It was great. It was awesome.
If you do $850 over the course of 18 weeks, that comes out to about $47 and change per week to watch NFL football, which, I mean, I'd pay even 4 times that to watch NFL football, to be quite honest.
Well, you can't. That's 2 beers at the if you go to the stadium, it's 2 beers.
Exactly.
So, I mean, what are you complaining about?
Or if you go to your local sports bar to watch the games there, you're going to rack up a bill more than $47. So it's you just got to kind of put it into perspective. And now I guess not everybody's a junkie like us. Maybe they just watch their one team, or they only watch every, there's different circumstances, but we're junkies. So for us, it's definitely worth it. I'd pay a ridiculous amount of money to watch every single NFL game, but that's just something I know a lot of fans were discussing, just because streaming is now getting more and more involved, and the NFL is going to continue to I guess, spread its wings when it comes to distributing their games out there, as they should. They make a lot of money and they're in high demand, and if I was a company, I'd be looking to buy NFL games as well, because it's going to bring a lot of eyeballs. Before we get out of here, a lot's going to be made about strength of schedule. Everyone talks about easy schedule, hard schedule, rest advantage, rest disadvantage, situational spots. Do you think on the outside that we're overrating this stuff? Because I know strength of schedule, one that's a lot of people have sort of debunked the previous year's win percentage thing, and they kind of focus more on the win totals, the average win total of this year. I think the betting market's a better indication of that. But I guess, what do you make of all the strength of schedule discussion that we're going to be inundated with over the next week or so?
Well, I think it's irrelevant because, look, what did we say earlier in the year about analytics? You can't measure something that changes. And so this year's teams are different, right? They're from coaching to players. So last year was last year, right? Last year's schedule was different. Last year's opponents were different. I think strength of schedule is the most overrated element of all this. Now, if you're telling me how many good quarterbacks we're facing, that's a different ballgame.
Yeah.
Right? How many really elite quarterbacks are we have to play? I mean, so let's take the Raiders. We started this pod off talking about them. They got to go to Los Angeles, play against Herbert, fly back across the country, play against Lamar Jackson. Those 2 good teams. The Chargers weren't in the playoffs last year. Nope. But I would say that's a better strength of schedule than Pittsburgh was in the playoffs last year as a playoff team.
Yeah. No, I think that's a good way to look at it. Head coach, quarterback. That's how you just look at it with these teams. All right, who are we playing? And the situational stuff, I think, does factor in. If it's the Niners, it's a little bit difficult playing 4 teams coming off the bye. That's the Chiefs, the Cowboys, all these teams are playing after they're getting off the bye, so they get multiple weeks to prepare for you. But in terms of strength of schedule and this team was really good last year, we see it every year in the NFL. Teams who are good one year, they're bad the next. Teams who were bad one year, they're good the next year. That's why we love the league, the parity. You're going to get your core teams at the top, your Chiefs, your Ravens, barring injury, those teams will always be good. But more often than not, the middle is just changing. The turnover rate is crazy, which is why the NFL is so fun, because hope is right around the corner for every NFL franchise and every NFL fan base. I do think one thing I will say, I talked about it earlier in the pod as well, like the second half of the schedule, like just I would honestly even ignore that, to be quite honest. Like the first half is all you need to focus on because we just don't know what's going to happen in this season. Guys are going to get hurt. Things are going to happen. They're going to develop. It's just too dynamic to focus on. Oh man, we have a really tough December. Do you? It's May. We don't know. I think you got to kind of put all that in perspective.
And that's a great point. Like, if you're getting ready to play a team and their starting quarterback's hurt, is that a tough game now? Yeah. If you're getting ready to play week 2 and you're Cincy and you got to go into Kansas City and Pat Mahomes has a sprained ankle and he can't play, how's that game going to go for you? It's no longer has the same effect. So that's why I think you can't really react. I think the one thing what we're trying to do here is the teams that we think have problems at quarterback, can they overcome those problems? Can the Raiders overcome Minshew? Can they overcome Aiden O'Connell? Can the Giants overcome Daniel Jones, Drew Lock? How good is Jacoby Brissett going to be, right? I mean, so that's kind of where we focus this on is if you're trying to gain an advantage, it starts with what the quarterbacks are. That's why 6 went in the first round.
100%. There's that urgency to go ahead and get those quarterbacks there. In the coming weeks, I'll start to do some of my win total work. I'm looking forward to that. Now that we can get the sequencing right, I can't wait to get in. I know you've already been giving out win totals for those of you that have read Michael's column on vsin.com. You've been able to grab some of those already, but I can't wait. Like this was the last milestone to really be like, okay, the NFL season. We're not right around the corner. Still 113 days until week 1, but now we have the schedule. We know the sequencing of all this stuff. OTAs around the corner, mini camp next month. We're off and running, man. This is a lot of fun. Schedule is out.
Well, and the lies will be coming in, and everybody's going to the Super Bowl, so don't even worry about it.
Yeah. Well, everyone has a tough schedule, but then simultaneously, the floor will be 10-7. That's every franchise. It's like we can go at least 10-7 with this schedule. 10 wins, baby. All right, that does it for this edition of the pod. Thank you to our producer, Elliot Bowman, with us on the ones and twos. As always, subscribe, rate, and review. Keep smashing those like buttons on YouTube. It really helps us out on our DraftKings page. Like, subscribe, comment on those YouTube pages, YouTube videos, I should say. It really does help out the pod. And subscribe, rate, and review, like I just mentioned. Michael, enjoy the rest of the weekend. Enjoy the NBA playoffs.
Enjoy the weekend.
We'll be dialed into that. Enjoy the Preakness. That's on Saturday if you get into the horse. And the PGA Championship, which teed off today at Valhalla. So we got a lot going on this sports week.
Oh, I can't wait to watch that.
It's going to be a whole lot of fun.
I love it. It's a good time of the year. All right. Thanks, Femi.
All right, see you then.